I need to reshare your screen.
Oh, very good. All right, I think the screen is being shared. Thank you for that, Chamara. And it is 2:30. We have one participant. What do you say we wait a moment or two to see if others will join, or should we?
No, let's get started.
Okay, very good. All right, well, hello and welcome. Thanks very much for jumping in, Shaskia. It's kind of you to join us. My name is Taural Rhoden, and I'll be helping moderate the conversation today around liberating your data, creating transactional data layer for digital transformation and AI adoption. This is a joint partnership or joint venture with Anthosa Consulting, who I represent, and MongoDB. Next slide, please. And the next one. I'd like to introduce the experts who are going to be doing most of the talking today. Chamara, who is the CEO and founder of Anthosa Consulting. Say hello, Chamara. Very good, very good. And then we have Tim Fang, who's a business value consulting leader for EMEA and APAC. Tim, you want to say hello? Very good, from MongoDB. And then we have Tristan Pather, who's a solutions architect, also from MongoDB. Good. All right. And the agenda for today is going to be relatively straightforward. I'll try to ease into the topic, and I'll provide a bit of context, a bit of challenges, so we can zoom in on the really interesting stuff. And we'll land on the next chapter, which is introducing the various concepts. Tim and Chamara will be talking about where we've come from, where we are now, and what the future looks like to sort of emphasize the importance of this topic. We'll then move into a really interesting customer scenario, which Tristan will be talking to Chamara, and then we'll give you the opportunity to ask some questions. Now, mind you, you can ask questions along the way, I believe, on chat. We'd like to keep the folks who are speaking, give them the opportunity to talk through things, but I'll be keeping an eye on the chat. And when we move into the Q&A, you'll be more than able to interact and have your questions answered. We'll conclude with a quick wrap up, and thank you for joining live. Those of you who've joined live will have the opportunity to win a little bit of something, and we'll talk to that towards the very end. And with that, we'll move forward. So in terms of setting the context, there's a really great quote here by a British mathematician. In 2006, Clive, who's a mathematician and data scientist, humbly said that data is the new oil. Unlike oil, our information or data is regenerative. It keeps, we can renew it, we can create it. And in fact, over the past few years, we've seen explosive growth in data. In particular, I think the World Economic Forum has said by this year, daily we'll be creating 463 exabytes of data every day. That's a tremendous amount of data which is being created. This is due to a proliferation of systems. Organizations now rely on many more systems than they have done previously. And it's oftentimes a mix of SaaS systems, legacy databases, as well as on-premise platforms as well. In order to stay competitive, this remains true. Companies need to be on their toes when it comes to digital transformation. And in order to modernize your operations, seek efficiencies, get more revenue in, treat their clients better, they're relying still on fragmented and outdated data infrastructures. And this slows things down. I've heard a quote, which I thought was lovely, around the idea of the last best interaction that a customer has on a digital medium is what they expect from every other interaction later on. So there's an expectation for clients or for consumers to have real-time interaction. Again, this is difficult if we're dealing with a fragmented and disjointed data landscape. With the use of multiple clouds, we know that critical data is spread across a variety of cloud providers. And there hasn't really been the ability to get seamless integration across that and to manage it. And last but not least, the news of the day, AI. We've been talking about AI, generative AI, for a little over a year now, This year, it's agentic AI. It's really having AI used to create and do things, to take actions. And all of AI-driven innovation, whether it's generative, agentic, or otherwise, depends on high-quality data which is timely, correct, complete. So that's sort of the context that we're in. Moving forward to the challenges that we've got, I love this quote from Jay. Jay is a customer experience kind of a guru, and he says that we're surrounded by data, but we're starved for insights. So we find all of our business information, all of our data in a variety of silos. It's scattered across a variety of systems. It's difficult to scale systems because legacy databases struggle to handle growing data volumes. This causes bottlenecks and downtimes. This all leads to slow development. Previous data models, rigid data models, have made it difficult not only to integrate, but again, to scale and to find that innovation, that we're looking to, that allows us to take advantage of the promise of digital to move to market faster. It's increasingly difficult to manage data across the various cloud providers that we've got. It's costly and it creates inefficiencies. And as anyone knows, if you've negotiated deals with some of the larger SaaS platform vendors, you're signing multi-year deals, so you tend to be locked in as well. The data experience can be slow, it can be outdated, and this leads to our applications being laggy and oftentimes inaccurate real data updates. Last but not least, with things like the GDPR, PCSDSI compliance, there's a variety of compliance regulations that make the topics of data security, data privacy more relevant. And how you manage that across this fragmented landscape, as I talked about, is again a significant challenge. And so moving on to kind of the punchline of this section is you need a strategic approach to manage these challenges and to meet the context of modern day business, modern day enterprises. It's not slowing down, things are accelerating. Data is being created at a much faster pace, as we've talked about. And quite simply, if your business or your organization doesn't have a plan, you're going to be constantly playing catch up. So I think with that as sort of setting the stage for the conversations ahead of us, I'll hand it over now to both Tim and Chamara.
Thanks, Taural. Thanks you very much for that introduction, and you set the stage really nicely with setting the context. And I think that quote by Clive Humby, "Data is the new oil." I think that's really resonating in today's world. And also, I think what's also happening is how these things are moving and how it's actually creating value. And I think it's not just data is the new oil; it's also the value creation is also accelerating with the data, right? So organizations really start to think about how they're adapting their data strategy to adopt AI, drive digital transformation. So with that in mind, in the next few slides between myself and Tim, we'll take a look at where we've come from. We'll take a look at what the status quo is, and also we'll kind of take a peek around the corner and see where are we headed, what's happening in this space in the future, right? So I want to start with some quotes from some of the tech leaders, right? And this is kind of like looking back at how the last 15, 20 years have evolved. And I remember in 2007, Larry Ellison, who's the CEO of Oracle, said, "Just say no to SaaS." And then in 2008, Mark Benioff made a similar comment around software, said software is dead. And I just want to take a look behind the scenes of why they were actually making these statements and understand what their drivers were. So when Larry Ellison made that statement in 2007, Oracle was largely on-premise ERP software provider, and quite a bit of their revenue was actually tied into on-premise ERP licenses. So when he saw some of the new SaaS providers coming up and taking their market share away, they were kind of fighting against it. So when Larry Ellison made the statement, his driver was actually they wanted to protect their existing market share. But then if you really fast forward over the next 10, 15 years, what you will see is now actually Oracle is one of the largest SaaS companies in the world, right? So, and similarly, if you look at what Mark Benioff said in 2008, who's the CEO of Salesforce. He said software is dead. And he just made this statement when they launched the Force.com platform as the rebirth of software. They were driving Force.com as a way to try and modernize and reinvent quite a bit of the enterprise landscape in terms of all the software that existed, in terms of the on-premise ERP systems and everything. But Force.com didn't really have the traction that they were expecting. But in the end, it actually evolved into what we know today as the Salesforce platform, which happened after Salesforce actually acquired MuleSoft, acquired Tableau, and I'm pretty sure there were several other acquisitions that they went through during that period, which I'm forgetting. But anyway, the point of the story is they actually launched something, said something, but then shortly after they kind of pivoted in terms of how the market was evolving. And I think the most interesting quote that I've heard recently is this statement that Satya Nadella, who is usually quite soft-spoken person, made this outrageous comment: SaaS is dead in 2024 December. And I want to actually take a look at this one, because we all know Microsoft has a large presence in the enterprise. And if you really look at what their presence is across email, collaboration tools, productivity tools, Office, that's the Office suite, and maybe in some space in terms of the operating systems themselves, in terms of the desktop, right? So they have a really large footprint in that space in terms of the end user computing and the collaboration tools and the communication tools, but they really struggle to crack the nut in terms of what people call these systems of records, right? Systems of records are these core systems that you have in organizations that has the core data, that drives the core business processes. And Microsoft have really struggled to get into this space. So when Satya Nadella made this comment in December 20 last year, what he was looking at was they've been trying to push Dynamics 365 business applications for a while now. And with agentic AI coming in, they see this as a way to try and drive the agenda forward. So what he was looking at doing is essentially seeing how business applications together with the Office suites and the agentic AI can actually give them that foothold in the enterprise that they want to try and preserve in the future. And I think the most outrageous comment out of all that is probably what Mark Benioff made earlier this year. He said they're not hiring any engineers in 2025. And if you really peel the curtain behind it and see what's driving this comment in Mark Benioff, this is my interpretation, by the way. And what I'm thinking is Salesforce is driving this Agentforce adoption quite heavily. And obviously they're telling all the customers that Agentforce is the future. So what they're trying to say is, yes, we are not hiring engineers in 2025 because we're actually using generative AI to drive a lot of code generation for our own purposes. So that's why you should be considering this. So to me, this is Salesforce's way of saying this is happening for them. They are creating value through this. All their customers should be looking at that as well, right? And I think the kicker here is the leaders will usually say what drives their agenda, what drives their purpose. To me, it's just marketing. We should actually take a step back and really understand what's happening and how does that help customers. And what we're trying to do today is actually take a look at what's really happening in this space. How do we help customers modernize their legacy? How do we help customers drive digital transformation? How do we help customers through AI adoption? And that's what we are trying to help with. And earlier I made this comment about systems of records. And obviously, when it comes to systems of record, usually if you look at it, there's 3 systems of record that's kind of considered as the leading systems of record. To me, I think 2 of them are definitely, that's SAP and Oracle. And then the third one that usually gets categorized in that group is Salesforce. But to me, I think Salesforce is more of a system of engagement. I want to put a little bit of clarity around system of record and system of engagement here. So when it comes to a system of record, this is, as I said earlier, this is where the core data is, this is where the core business processes are. And if you look at systems of engagement, these are how users get access to this data. This is how users get access to these processes. And usually, in some cases in the past, with a lot of the legacy monolithic systems, they built the system of records and system of engagement together. But what we are starting to see in the enterprise is actually Salesforce and ServiceNow have built a business around how they can actually help with decoupling this. with the systems of record and systems of engagement, right? And if you really look at the two biggest system of record vendors, SAP and Oracle, they launched their current or the latest versions of software more than 10 years ago. SAP launched the SAP for HANA in February 2015. That's nearly 10 years ago. And Oracle launched their Fusion platform in 2010 or 2011, I think, September 2010. And over the last 10 years, SAP have only managed to migrate 45% of their customers from the legacy platforms onto SAP for HANA. And if you look at Oracle, they've only managed 27% despite being around for 15 years, right? And why is this hard, right? And I think that's what we want to look at here. Why is this hard? It's mainly because these systems drive the core business processes. These systems contain the core data. But at the same time, there's a lot of complexity associated with this in terms of how the users are using these systems and how the users are putting in a lot of their customizations into these core systems. And that's been what's been actually holding back a lot of the modernization, right? So what Salesforce have been doing is a lot of the customer-facing workflows for sales, marketing, or service, or field service management, they've actually grown mainly from being able to extract those customizations from legacy systems onto their platform and be able to provide that system of engagement that enables the legacy modernization, right? And similarly, ServiceNow have created a niche around internal facing workflows for whether it's HR, whether it's supply chain management, or whether it's procure to pay, and I'm sure you've all heard of ServiceNow in the context of IT. So a lot of these workflows are actually being moved across to ServiceNow, and that's enabling legacy modernization, right? And in the next slide, I want to look at 3 patterns that are coming and appearing, right? One of them is this concept of the SaaS sprawl and the data sprawl. And the next one is this evergreen promise of SaaS. And then the third one is this new paradigm that's appearing, which is around the static processes versus agentic AI. And if we really talk about the SaaS sprawl and the data sprawl, I came across some statistics from SaaS Academy where they said average large enterprise uses somewhere in the order of 450 SaaS applications. And there was another similar data statistic that was from CropLink, which is another SaaS data aggregator, where they said by 2025, 85% of businesses will be SaaS, and business apps will be SaaS apps, right? And another statistic that I found out, this was from G2 Track, which I'm sure you heard of, tracks a lot of the SaaS application statistics as well. What they said was more than 53% of SaaS application licenses actually go unused. Think about that, right? So average large enterprise uses more than nearly 450 SaaS apps, and nearly 85% of the business apps are going to be 50% of these licenses are actually not being used, right? So what's driving this? What's driving this, right? So I want to look at what's driving this. I think what's driving this is actually what's hidden behind it, which is all the data sprawl, right? So yes, these systems are supposed to be making our lives easier, but at the same time, it's also spreading all this data across all these systems, right? So all your structured and unstructured data actually are spread across these multiple SaaS systems. And looking at the structured data, it's mostly a lot of the transactional data that's in SaaS systems. But if you also look at unstructured data, this makes up more than 80% of organizations' data, right? And these are in millions of financial reports. These are in corporate reports, corporate strategy documents. These are in source code files. These are in contracts, right? And these are all across these SaaS applications that you're using, right? So if an average organization has over 250 different types of business critical categories of data, unstructured data, having all these data spread across multiple SaaS systems, hundreds of SaaS systems, how does that help you adopt AI? How does that help you modernize your legacy systems, right? And I think this challenge was really clearly highlighted by Salesforce's own recent acquisition of this company called Own Company or Own Data. This Own Data is actually a company that created a backup platform allowing all SaaS providers to back up customer data. And Salesforce saw this as a way to try and get visibility of all the customer data that's actually across multiple SaaS environments. And it enabled them to actually create integration from their CRM system into any other SaaS systems that actually has this data, right? And this was their driver behind this acquisition. But I think what I want to also talk about next is this evergreen promise of SaaS. And when SaaS systems are introduced, quite often people talk about how it has the latest, it's standardized and scalable on-demand version. They talk about how everyone's on the latest version of software with latest features. And it talks about no longer having to go through lengthy upgrade cycles and lengthy data migrations. But let's look at really what's happening. To me, it's a good promise, but this is quite challenging. And this is why even though there are SaaS versions from all these legacy ERP vendors, not too many have actually started to migrate this way, because the changes take time. Standardization diminishes the unique differentiation for customers. So all those customer-facing workflows that had different ways how organizations operate and drive value for their customers, that's not helping with the migration onto SaaS, right? And there are challenges in adopting because users are pushing back, or there are implementation difficulties because these implementations are usually quite large and they all take time, right? And because of all these, the ever-growing promise of SaaS, even though it's good on paper, it's not really delivering value for customers. That's what I'm seeing, right? And I think this is where AI can actually really drive a different value proposition for users and customers, right? So this notion of static processes versus agentic AI, right? So static processes, the way to think about this is you have data coming in, you have business logic which is fixed, and then you have these actions or insights coming out on the other side. And then with agentic AI, what you have is a different paradigm. What you have is you have data coming in, you have prompts, which is what you provide as input into what you want being done. And then the data that's dynamic, that's being provided as input into the agentic AI itself. And then you have actions and insights coming out of it, right? But what's also possible with agentic AI is actually you can go into a repeatable loop to continually learn and continually refine those outcomes, continually refine and continually update those actions that you're taking, right? So it drives a different value proposition, right? So those business processes that SaaS applications are trying to standardize, they are going to get disrupted in the future with agentic AI coming in. And this is why I'll put this quote here that says SaaS is the new mainframe. A lot of organizations are actually struggling to modernize them. A lot of organizations are struggling with implementations. So what we are going to be talking about in the next few slides is actually about how does a data layer help with this legacy modernization? How does a data layer help with future of agentic AI, right? And that's what we're going to be talking about next. I'll hand over to Tim to talk a little bit about some of the new AI patterns that are emerging.
Yep. Thanks, Chamara. So if we go to the next slide, yeah. So there's like three particular approaches around AI adoption. So first of all, we call it citizen development. That's more around within the software vendors themselves, providing AI tools that can augment the experience of using those platforms. Then there's the next level, which is personal productivity. I think this is where most people are at right now, using ChatGPT to make yourself more productive, to search for knowledge faster. And then on the other side, it would be like the AI platforms, which provide, I guess, the tools and the environment in order to take advantage of building AI native applications. So on the first part around what we call citizen development, so Chamara spoke about the fact that Salesforce acquired own company-owned data in order to find a way to host other companies' data within the Salesforce ecosystem. You combine that with the fact that they had a CDP offering as part of Marketing Cloud, which they repositioned as the Data Cloud now. And Data Cloud was mainly used by marketers as a data integration platform. But now they even offer things such as a vector database in there as part of rebranding themselves as an AI-first platform. in the past, Salesforce were actually trying to do this with the integration of bringing in ERP data into their CRM in the old Einstein Analytics offering, but it was rarely used by customers because it was difficult to orchestrate, and I guess the cost of doing so was not worth the value that it delivered. But now they've got the new Agentforce offering. So once you've ingested multiple data sources to create sort of this quasi data layer within the Salesforce ecosystem, you can actually use the native AI tools in order to orchestrate the right customer campaigns and customer engagement, as Chamara talked about, as a system of engagement. But this is only most useful when you have the full Salesforce suite in place. You have Sales or Service Cloud and Marketing Cloud. And so what I'm saying is that whilst the SaaS platforms provide AI capabilities to enhance productivity within their own ecosystem, it's actually only most valuable when it's contained within their own ecosystem. But in reality, like what percentage of a customer's tech stack is going to be Salesforce based? It's not going to be that much. There's a lot more than that. So in the situation that you need to integrate a larger set of applications, you'll need to ingest new workloads, which will have regularly changing patterns. You'll need to create new orchestration layers to know which endpoints to hit. You'll have all the overhead of maintaining and updating necessary schemas and data structures. So you need a data structure which has the ability to manage and search multimodal data types, like MongoDB, for instance. But I won't dive too deeply into there. Chamara, you also added another point about this area too.
And thanks, Tim. And I think this is probably the thing that not too many SaaS vendors are talking about, right? So obviously, your data is in these SaaS systems, but what the SaaS vendors are also doing is actually they're building these AI models that are getting smarter and smarter as they as you use the AI models to get insights from your data, because they use what's called self-supervised learning. Essentially, self-supervised learning is when you use the data to do something with AI can actually use that data to make itself smarter, right? So what's happening is what I call the value leak. Essentially, your data is actually adding value onto these SaaS software providers software stack. But then on the other side, you actually have to pay extra for the use of these models, right? Because most SaaS vendors will say, oh yeah, you want to use the AI model? Yes, here's the add-on charge for the AI model, right? So you're paying on two sides. One is you're actually making their software smarter by using the AI models, which constitutes the value leak. And on the other side, you have this additional licensing fees you have to pay because you're using the AI models. I'll let Tim talk about the personal productivity and the AI platforms.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point you make there, Chamara. So you pay the license, then you pay consumption of the AI tools. So yeah, you're making your vendors richer in that way. I guess the next level of AI usage would be personal productivity. I think this is probably the stage we're all at. So I would say that all the LLM providers, whether it be OpenAI or Anthropic or Perplexity or even Gemini, they're all making knowledge workers more productive at work. Our best sales teams probably are using Perplexity Pro quite a lot in order to do account research far more efficiently, for the salespeople that do account research. But where we see the biggest impact right now is within the application development and modernization space. So for instance, at MongoDB, we work with our customers to actually help them build a tool set on their existing application infrastructure. So this goes from interpreting their business logic, which is either contained within the application code base, or it could be stored within stored procedures. We can even do crazy cool things. For instance, we can record someone click around on an application, see all the different functionalities of the app, and then actually turn that into test cases and actually code them and automate them such that when an application does get modernized, we can validate that the same functionality exists. And the great part about it is that these personal productivity tools are not contained to one particular provider or vendor. It can be done with hyperscaler of your choice if they offer your favorite LLM, or even on-prem with Llama. And now we've got DeepSeek as a potential option also, if they have the right hardware in place. Or with DeepSeek, you don't even have to have the very expensive H100 GPUs. Yeah, I've seen videos of people running them on their own AMD machines. But where I think the next evolution will be after, I guess, augmenting the productivity of developers in particular, will be in the recent offerings. So OpenAI have Operator. I saw Gemini's deep research mode, and I think the other LLM providers have a similar deep research mode. You just ask it a question such as, who should Google acquire next, who would be the best prospect, and it'll go generate like a very thorough, like 15-page report on like who's the next acquisition target. So knowledge workers who are like consultants, researchers, analysts, they're really going to benefit. On the other side of things, so David Solomon, or DJ D-Sols, sometimes known, who's the CEO of Goldman Sachs, he reflected that 95% of an IPO prospectus can now be completed by AI. And so what this means is that you'll see the hiring of like, entry level, even mid-level professionals might slow down because the productivity of their existing professionals can be significantly augmented through these tools. So this is like a really big area. But this is just contained within how do I make an existing person work faster at what they do. I guess I wouldn't say the end point of the paradigm, but the next shift in that paradigm would be the AI platforms themselves. Because right now we're speaking about how AI can help existing business processes, taking an agentic point of view, as we spoke about before. But what about an AI native point of view? So there's two approaches to this. So on the hyperscaler side, your usual AWS, GCP, Azure, they provide a blank canvas. So you have the team that understands like how to build an AI native application. They've got the skills, they've got the vision, they understand the right design patterns. Hyperscalers provide the full suite of tools that enable this, starting with the right GPUs attached to powerful machines. They provide the LLMs, they provide the embedding models, they've got native vector databases, they've got different search that you can deploy, like the building blocks of an application, in addition to, guess what would be required to deploy an application in the right environment. The world is their oyster, and this is still very much a state of flux in this space. The other side, the other is probably a little bit more comprehensible. It's what we call the machine learning as a service platforms in the past, whether it be Dataiku, DataRobot. Databricks is playing in this space, and increasingly Snowflake is trying to get into this territory. Instead of a blank canvas, I call this a paint by numbers approach, where you've got the tools to deploy, where they can be an all-in-one platform that can do data preparation, model development, and then the deployment of AI within an application as a feature or a service. This is probably the other approach that the AI platforms are taking, which will be more palatable, particularly for internal teams for their use cases. And even in a case like Snowflake, they've gone one step further with a unified data solution where they're integrating like their traditional strength of the data warehouse with a fundamental data layer or operating data layer. So those are like the three main areas that we're seeing around AI adoption. What that means is that, every company is trying to position themselves as an AI company, but I'll let Chamara speak more about that.
Thanks, Tim. I want to actually use this quote made by Luke Williams, who is an innovation professor at the NYU Stern. He was actually one of my lecturers from the MBA that I did with him, Monash, quite recently. And he's this amazing keynote speaker. You should actually follow him on LinkedIn and look at some of his videos. He makes points really great. Well, but one of these statements that he made recently in one of his keynote speeches actually really made an impact to me. Right? What he said was, every company is an AI company. And he goes on to explain this, right? And over the next 5 years, there's going to be nearly $15 trillion of additional GDP added to the global economy, according to one of the recent PwC reports, right? And I want to take a quick look at how is this going to be realized, right? So obviously Tim spoke about earlier about personal productivity and efficiency. So these are part of what will actually contribute to the GDP growth. And then the other aspect of this is actually innovation and business growth. So what we haven't spoken about so far is actually, yes, all these organizations have large amounts of data, but how can you actually monetize this data? How can you create new value? And that involves by being able to look at this data in a single pane of glass and understand how do you actually use it to drive new value? How do you experiment on it? How do you create new machine learning models that can actually give you different insights, right? So innovation and business growth is going to be part of what drives this value. And then obviously the third aspect of this is more around the cost reduction and risk mitigation. Again, having data in a single pane of glass, in a single location, in a single data layer, that's going to be a super useful thing for organizations, right? And this sets us up nicely for the next section that you want to talk about, which is where are we headed, right? So why do we need to think differently? right? So we are at what I call, we're facing this most significant rewrite of enterprise software ever. And why am I saying this, right? So obviously we looked at all these different paradigms around SaaS application with standard business processes, agentic AI, AI native apps that are evolving on the AI platforms, and how does this all connect? How does this all drive value for businesses, right? And this is where we want to actually connect things to things that are really happening in the enterprise, right? And if we really look at why is legacy modernization critical, right? As you saw, Oracle and SAP have really struggled with legacy modernization and moving their customers over to the new versions of their platforms, right? And obviously, if you really look at digital transformation, you can see what's happening. I'm sure there's lots of statistics that you've seen across this. The most often quoted statistic is only less than 30% of digital transformations are successful. But recently I saw something that said less than 12% are successful, right? But anyway, it really shows why these things are struggling, because it's mainly because this legacy is what's holding you back. This tech debt is what's holding you back. And what I'm trying to say is we really need to be thinking about this differently, right? So when it comes to digital transformation and AI adoption, we need to take a different perspective or different approach on things. To me, I want to use a quick analogy here to actually try and make my point, right? So when electric motors started becoming widely available, most manufacturing organizations started replacing the traditional steam engines they had in their factories with electric motors. But if you really look at what happened in the era of steam engines, what they had was this huge steam engine in the middle of a factory that was driving everything with pulleys and belts going everywhere, right? But when they put in motors, they didn't actually simply replace that steam engine with a giant motor and then keep using the same pulleys and belts, right? But what they did was they actually looked at where was the power needed, and they applied the power where it was needed. They used smaller motors to drive more efficiencies, right? So what we need to be thinking about is actually, when it comes to legacy modernizations, how do we actually look at decomposing these large legacy systems and driving value and driving intelligence and driving the capabilities in a more smaller scale, right? So and what does this mean for AI adoption, right? So if we think about adopting AI on top of our existing legacy systems, what's going to happen with the tech debt? What's going to happen with all the complexity? What's going to happen when you need to access data across multiple SaaS systems and multiple legacy systems? They're not all going to disappear all of a sudden. You're still going to need to access these, right? You're still going to need to be able to address what your tech debt, right? So if we just lay AI on top of it and try to drive AI adoption through that, what you're essentially doing is essentially what most people would have heard this term, lipstick on a pig. Or I think there's another term around turds, on gold on turds. Right? So you can't really do that. You really need to be thinking differently when it comes to AI adoption and digital transformation, right? If you really want to drive value quickly, if we really don't want to deliver outcomes quickly, we really need to be thinking differently. We really need to be thinking smaller, right? We need to think about how do we decompose legacy systems to drive value quicker, right? Because at the moment, it's the complexity that's slowing us down, right? So when we think about legacy modernization, we need to think differently. We need to do things differently. We need to try to innovate, right? And this is going to be necessary for us to focus on our outcomes. It's going to be necessary for us to drive value quicker on the investments. And this is why we believe it will enable us to create value from your data by liberating your data from these legacy systems and the SaaS systems, right? And I think the next few steps that you're going to be looking at in terms of the opportunities, I'll let team talk about how is generative AI actually driving some opportunities around legacy modernization.
Yeah, thanks, Chamara. So at MongoDB, we're actually seeing two distinct groups of companies who are trying to modernize, and you'd be surprised about these groups. Well, the first one is not, it's large enterprises They have ever-growing application workloads. So at the time they were designed and built, they were fit for purpose. But now as their business grows, they're struggling with the size and particularly the maintenance needs. And also, I guess the skills that are available to maintain those applications in particular, because they were built on older frameworks. An example would be in banking. Yeah, banks have ever-growing AML requirements in particular. So the greater scrutiny of money flows. Banks need to see where all customer transactions have been going, even up to 10 years or more, and be able to respond back to the regulators if they have questions about a potentially sanctioned individual. They have a need to apply analytics to these transactional databases with extremely high storage and throughput requirements. In the previous world, it would be about writing a query and just letting it run for half an hour or even longer, because this was expected, but this is no longer acceptable. So if you think about how you would structure the data layer itself in order to search this information, how you even record this information into the data layer, this can be completely changed. Instead of storing in the traditional transactional database, we can think about it more on the document level. What about the actual what's the word I'm thinking of? Sorry. When you actually approve a transaction, for instance, as a banking customer, someone's got to approve it. Someone's got to process it. All this information used to be contained in tables, but what if it could be contained in the actual core documents which they occurred in? What if you could actually search on those documents directly without having to structure it in such a normalized way? So this is one really big opportunity with large enterprises and their application workloads and modernizing them. The other one will actually be a real surprise to you all. It's probably scale-ups themselves, people who are digital or even position themselves as AI native. Because as someone who's built a business myself, how you build is like very much like stitching together multiple things. So your business grows, you've got new requirements from a new customer, and you just like do whatever it takes. And so you've got like a real mishmash, like a real spider web that you have to untangle because you've got multiple services running together, whether it be your operational data layer, then you need a high performance layer, so you put in caching, then you need to start doing reporting and optimizing your business, so you put in analytics. Then your business grows, so you start doing more reporting, so you have BI. And then all of a sudden, your customers want to be able to like use other parts of your service and other parts of your data. So you need to implement search. You end up going with up to 5 different vendors just for those 5 different things. And so they struggle to maintain multiple parts of their tech stack to support one application. And in that situation, whilst you can deploy AI services over the top, the maintenance and I guess the work required to consolidate everything into one place is a real nightmare. So companies like this need a solution that can support all of these areas. So they're actually focusing their tech teams on building new features and services rather than maintaining the debt that they've built up, which is another strength of MongoDB. Where does Gen AI tools factor in amongst all this? Well, there's actually the 2 main areas. I described one of them before, which is around how do you identify the underlying business logic within application code? The way we do that is actually by deploying Gen AI tools because they can read the code base, they can read a stored procedure, they can describe to you what's going on, such that when you modernize it into a modern code base, you'll be able to replicate that logic in a new framework. That's probably the first one. And the second one's probably even more fundamental. It's about if you've got applications which are really built on like a monolithic architecture, Gen AI can actually help the architects to apply some domain-driven design thinking to decouple that monolithic app into a series of microservices. So Gen AI tools are really accelerating the work of tech people in order to allow this modernization work to happen. In the past, things such as going through each stored procedure one at a time is the most costly and painful part of a modernization. Now with Gen AI in place, at MongoDB, we've helped our customers accelerate this process by more than 10x, to be honest. So that cost and pain attached to that is far lower than before. And so that's why Chamara said every company is an AI company because it starts with every company having a software first mindset because that's what they're providing to their customers at the end of the day, a really good digital experience. So if we get to the next slide about where we're headed, so data strategy is the key to enabling the future. And this is where we talk about the role of the data layer and how they're evolving. And so I would say like from those 2 scenarios which I spoke about the types of companies that are trying to modernize, the data layer needs to do 2 things. First of all, you need a consolidated environment, regardless of whether it's a transactional database, operational database, even an analytical database. In the past, you could have taken different vendors to serve these needs. But imagine if you had had the right environment where you could have multimodal and multi-purpose data managed from the same environment, managed from the same control tower. That's number one. Number two is you've got what we call, traditional data storage, if you want to call it that. But now if you actually want to embrace the AI revolution, you need to understand, okay, what are my options when it comes to embeddings? What's the right vector database to ensure that different data types can be processed and queried with the same approach, and even adding additional semantic layers to that? Well, you need a database that can do it all. And of course, being a MongoDB employee, I'm going to say the answer is MongoDB. So I encourage you to find out more about it. What's the future then? So that's what the critical role of data layer is right now. So I would say like how data layers are evolving is probably nothing that's rocket science to any of you. Fundamentally, your data layers need to be able to be deployed across different environments, whether you still want to remain on-prem, which I respect, companies who still want to do that, or you're happy to go with one of the cloud hyperscalers. Fundamentally, you need to be able to do it with an approach that makes sense for you, both in terms of technical feasibility and the economics. The second part is the ability to scale both vertically and horizontally. So in an AI first world, so to speak, horizontal scaling becomes so much more important because you need to shard your data. You need to be able to index it natively. It helps you be able to search that data in the most efficient way. So that's another consideration you need to think about. Like, how much will your business grow? And there's a cost trade-off. Scaling vertically is the easiest way to throw more compute at something, but it's the most costly way to do it. Whereas scaling horizontally, you incur significantly more costs in terms of architecting your app up front, and also just like setting up all the nodes. But your growth rate won't be as exponential as scaling vertically. It'll grow more linearly as your application grows. And as I said before, all of these things I've described, it's best if you could have the right control tower, whether it be one of the third-party monitoring platforms or a database that actually provides like a cloud manager capability or an operations manager capability. So this is where the future of data layers are going to go to. But how does this impact legacy modernization? So I'll hand it back to Chamara to go through this part.
Thanks, Tim. And I think, Tim, you spoke about some of this earlier, right? So I think, where we really need to be looking at is actually how does having this common data layer help you simplify some of your legacy applications and enable the legacy modernization, right? So moving into microservices architecture, being able to build APIs on top of your data layer, and being able to drive modern architectures for whether it's mobile or whether it's web or whether it's multi-channel applications for user engagement, right? So those systems of engagement, being able to create those as more specialized applications that are driving a particular purpose rather than being more common systems that are built across multiple workflows is where things are evolving, right? And I think that's the bit that's actually becoming a lot easier with having a data layer, moving into a modern architecture, being able to decompose legacy systems into more self-contained applications based on a microservices architecture, right? And what does this enable, right? So if you really look at it, what's improving is actually this better user experience, because you can now actually create these tailored applications for a particular purpose or a particular set of use cases. And now the system that's built on a legacy ERP system or a legacy HR system, it makes it so much easier to say, now for leave applications, you actually have this separate app. You can whip it up on your mobile and do the leave applications, right? And it could be very specific to organization. Or similarly, it can be more just accessing your payroll. It could be easier, right? So it doesn't need to be part of that legacy ERP system or the HR system that you're using in the past, right? And obviously we spoke about the legacy, decomposing the legacy systems. And I think the next part is around, how does this make it easier to evolve the systems into more product models, right? And I'm sure you've all heard these product management and the product delivery being sort of the future of enterprise models, right? So there's some organizations that are moving into more product-based funding models. So how does this help? Right. So when you move into these spaces, being able to decompose these legacy systems into much smaller products that are self-contained, it makes it easier for you to actually evolve these quicker. It makes it easier for you to deliver value quicker. Right. So we've all heard this quote, return on investment. Actually, I want to put a spin on this. I want to create this term called return on value or value on investment. Right. So what we want to start thinking about is actually, if you move from a legacy system that's a monolithic to a microservices based modern application, what you get is actually your value on investment is much quickly realized, right? So you're moving into this ability to deliver value much quicker. And where most enterprises are heading towards is actually this, right? So you're looking for ways to deliver value quicker. You're looking for ways to deliver outcomes quicker. Right? So moving away from those legacy monolithic systems to more decomposed microservices architectures, it helps you deliver value quicker into your organization. And then that's where legacy modernization is moving. And this is how legacy modernization is becoming simpler, right? And looking at the next scenario, we're going to be looking at a couple of use cases. So just I'll talk about one of the healthcare customers that we worked with in the past, and then I'll quickly hand over to Teslan to cover another one of the MongoDB customers that they worked with. Right? So first one we're looking at is actually one of the healthcare transformation customers that we worked with. We helped them with their strategy. And what were the challenges they were faced with? They were faced with outdated paper-based workflows that were creating inefficiencies, and they were having delays in accessing results for the tests that are being conducted because of all the physical handoffs. And they had these data silos that are actually causing poor integration between legacy systems, whether it's an EMR system or whether it's a laboratory, EMR meaning electronic medical records. LIS is a laboratory information system, and then RIA is radiology information system. Right. So this was a healthcare customer that actually was providing testing services for clinicians, right? And the clinicians were ordering the tests, so patients would actually have to go to the lab to get their tests done, and then obviously the lab technicians would conduct the test, and the results would go back. So this all used to happen as a paper-based process, right? And when we worked with this customer initially, we gave them a view of how do we actually solve this problem, in using digital tools. So we worked with them to actually drive human-centered design. We applied the human-centered design on two aspects. One is more actually working on the strategy, which is more just working with them to actually figure out what's the strategy that will help them. And then on the other side, also looking at the solutions themselves. How do we actually apply human-centered design thinking and human-centered design methodology to designing the solutions, right? So what we came up with is it's these tailored digital tools. Obviously, we spoke earlier about how you can move from legacy systems into more decomposed legacy monolithic systems into more decomposed modern applications when it comes to digital transformation, right? So what we created for this customer is actually like tailored digital tools for clinicians to order the tests, right? So they had their own app. And then the laboratory technicians, when they're conducting the tests, for them to at their input, they had their own tailored app. And similarly, for patients to actually get access to their test results, we created a patient app. Right? And what we also looked at was actually how do we create that data layer, shared data layer for getting access to information that resides in the EMR system, that resides in the laboratory information system, that resides in the radiology information system, right? So the solution to that was actually creating this shared data layer. And so if you look at what were some of the benefits that they realized, right? And what were some of the learnings, right? So obviously this was a customer that had a very complex stakeholder group. So we had executives that we were working with, we had clinicians, we had lab techs, IT team, delivery partners, patients. Obviously, we had to consider all of them. So we had to actually really create these multidisciplinary workshops with different stakeholders, initially with executives to get the commitment to invest. And then subsequently, as we developed and designed each application and each part of the solution, make sure that the solution that we were building was actually what they needed, what really resonated with them. And then but by taking that human-centered approach, we were really able to take away a lot of the inertia, a lot of the pushback that you get from users, because we actually made them part of solving the problem, right? We worked with them to design the solution. And and also the other aspect was obviously this ability to transform complex business processes or clinical pathways, as they call in the healthcare land. Right? It's not just about the systems transformation. It's also about understanding what are these complex business processes. How do we actually transform them in a way? It reduces the complexity. It takes away the inefficiencies, and most importantly, it gives a better experience for everyone involved. Right? So need to engage the users on how we design the tools, how we enable the use of these tools was crucial for us. Right? So all in all, like for us, I think the critical aspect of this was, yes, data and digital transformation will drive value, but if you don't take the users on the journey, if you don't take your stakeholders on the journey, it's not going to be adopted. To me, that was one of the best cases of how we actually applied human-centered design, how we really applied some of the concepts that we spoke about earlier to actually drive really a real value for both the healthcare system, the clinicians, the lab techs, as well as the patients themselves. I'll hand over to Tesla to go over the next case study.
Yeah, thanks, Chamara. So I'll talk to you guys a little bit about Bosch. They're one of MongoDB's customers. Just a little bit about them. Most people tend to know them from their consumer goods, so laser levels, chargers, batteries, and things like that. But they actually are in a lot more industries. So, for instance, they're in the IoT space, car automotive ECUs, so the metrics behind how a car would operate, and also aircrafts. So a really big challenge Bosch faced really touches on what Tim and Chamara were saying earlier about needing a multimodal system where they can store different forms of data, whether they're semi-structured, structured, or completely unstructured, and they needed a nice single unified view, or as Tim mentioned, a control tower to be able to utilize all of this. So from the challenges, they were looking for something that was scalable, flexible, needed to be real time for your IoT data, something that had relatively good scaling horizontally or vertically, and you needed to have that mobility behind it. Now, the solution that they came up with was essentially building a new system on top of MongoDB. We have this platform called the Developer Data Platform, where we offer a range of tools and suites that assist you in being able to build a single unified view. So for instance, if you need something for time series, searching, your typical document store, you would generally look at different tools. So say if you were using a hyperscaler, that could be their time series offering, the document offering, could be a relational offering at the same time. You still run into the problem of having a web of tools that you have to manage, you have to maintain, from a degree of level. Like as much as a cloud provider can make sure those systems are up and running, you still need to understand how they work, how they can impact your end users and customers. So Bosch essentially looked at creating what they called a unified data layer. So they used MongoDB as that core database where they were able to send the document data and their IoT data. They were able to build a nice microservice architecture over the top of that. So they were being able to do things in real time extremely fast. And like a key solution or like area they focused on was in the aircraft manufacturing for their IoT space. So they call it Bosch's their digital IoT insights. Now, if you look at aircraft, right, you have millions of screws, nuts, and bolts that all keep that aircraft together. And Bosch needed a way to know with what happens if a screw doesn't get tightened, what happens if a bolt isn't there. They needed a way to make sure that these mission critical, hardware was essentially able to be, alerted or even, monitored. So they were able to send that IoT data across. So say as they were tightening a bolt, they knew exactly how tight that bolt was. They knew exactly how tight that screw was. So they were able to identify issues, in advance and be able to remedy them basically any way or as fast as they could. They leveraged MongoDB indexes, so they have different things like geospatial, so they know the location of where something occurred. They had their text searches, so they could quickly, run a search on their internal data and metrics to be able to find out where problems could lie, or even just figure out if they needed to provide anything. Now, their practical insights, or like the big impact they use from utilizing a single purpose or unified platform, was being able to accelerate their overall innovation. They were able to reduce the time the developers needed to fix a problem or find a problem or make new products, new code, things like that. And then the big one was just, I'll reiterate, is that acceleration of innovation. They're able to build new platforms, add new tools on top of MongoDB due to its nature. So if you have, updated schemas, you need something that's flexible, they all fit the categories of having a, developer data platform, just like MongoDB. So I'll hand back over to Taural for a quick Q&A.
Thanks very much, guys. And thanks to the audience for your attention. I've seen that no one has already posed a question. I'll ask it to the panelists. This is directed to the MongoDB folks. The question is how AI can help to moving databases from Microsoft SQL to Mongo.
Jocelyn, you want to take that one?
Yeah,
I'll come in over the
I can
top.
take that one. Nice and easy. So MongoDB has a excellent tool called the Relational Migrator. So it leverages essentially some GenAI functionality, but what it does is it can connect to your SQL database, Postgres, different types. Then you're able to essentially do that whole migration process. So it'll look at the tables that are in your database, it'll map them out, it'll show you what a MongoDB recommended schema is. You then can go in to refine that schema. Do you need to make adjustments? Are you cleaning up fields that aren't being used? It'll make a nice consolidated view. So it'll help you reduce your table sprawl. So in a relational sense, you could have 20, 100, thousands of tables. It will then provide you a smaller view of how MongoDB creates a rich document or collection. In that tool, you're able to bring in stored procedures, views, and essentially use GenAI to convert that to the MongoDB query language. That'll help you with understanding how you would build a MongoDB query and lessen that skill that was necessary to learn something new. And then it will also help with the migration. So you can point it to a MongoDB Atlas cluster, so our managed service, or you could point it to our on-premise Enterprise Advanced offering, and you'd be able to migrate your data. You have a few ways to do it. So you have a snapshot as well as continuous. So snapshot, as it suggests, you snapshot your database, and then it starts to migrate it over. And then with continuous, you're able to keep both up and running. So say if you need that relational database up and running until you finish building a MongoDB, you could then have a continuous stream of data being updated. So as the relational database gets an insert, it'll also insert into the MongoDB space. So it uses GenAI for that space as well as its own little bit of tech. It's all public, so if you want to go search it up, things like that, if you just look at the MongoDB Relational Migrator, you're able to get some more information.
That's great. Thanks, Jocelyn. Nuwan, hopefully that answered your question. Does anyone else have any questions for the panel? Oh, here we go. Great. Saskia has just put in a question, and I'll just read it aloud. Hello, I'm Saskia, and I thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge. She works as an internal full-stack developer, software engineering undergraduate, third year. She's always wanted to be an entrepreneur and create new jobs rather than compete for the existing ones. I know this out of the topic, but right now I have 2 raw, innovative ideas that I want to work with. Is it okay if I ask for feedback on these 2 ideas via LinkedIn due to privacy issues? I want to know if these ideas hold real-life applications. Saskia, I'm sure folks are happy for you to connect with them via LinkedIn. Did you have someone specifically that you wanted to ask the question to directly?
I'll connect. Shashika, feel free to connect with me and message me on LinkedIn. I'll take it. This is Chamara here, by the way. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Fantastic. That's good. That's the one she wanted to talk to. All right. Very good. Any other questions? Excellent. Well, as we're moving on in time, I would encourage you to reach out to the folks here on the link on LinkedIn who are on the panel. Let me put it that way, because I'm certain they'd be happy to connect to you. But as we kind of wrap it up, and we've sort of answered some of the questions that you've got, go ahead and move to the next slide, Kshama. We mentioned at the beginning that we did have a free giveaway. This is what we'd like to offer you for taking some time to listen and get informed. The first is we're really happy to put together a 45-minute exploratory session. So if you've got topics that you'd like to talk about that are specific to your job, your workplace, we'd be more than happy to organize a free 45-minute discovery call for you. I'm going to pause there because I just noticed that Ruchi has asked a question, and I'd like to give them the opportunity to ask the question. So let me just switch tact and I'll read the question. It is, can you use Mongo for creating vector databases? What is the advantage of having it on Mongo rather than using something like Azure AI?
Yeah, I can take that one quickly. So I guess to answer your question, yes, we offer a vector database as well. The big factor in why it would be advantageous to be running on MongoDB is we do give you that core database that runs the vector search and normal document search essentially together. So you don't have any, I guess, ETL, so extract, transform, and load. So if you're, say, building on a cloud provider or you're building with multiple tools, you generally would have a database, could be relational, could be document. You then have a vector database, and you'd have some sort of pipeline to then convert that data across. Whereas on the MongoDB side, we do have an automatic sync. All you really need to do is add your embeddings to your document. So you could add your embeddings from essentially anywhere. So we support, all the cloud providers. We support you using, say, OpenAI directly, Anthropic directly, Gemini directly, for instance. You have a lot of flexibility. So Mongo's stance at this is we'll provide you the technology. Feel free to use it, how you please. So we don't lock you down to a particular vendor or anything like that.
Thank you very much, Tristan. Thank you also, Ruchi, for the question. All right, moving back to the wrap up, we mentioned the 45-minute exploratory workshops that we're offering for free. It's a joint call with the folks you see here. If you're interested in that and you'd like to register for it, I'm going to just post an email address where you can write to request that 45-minute discovery workshop. It's in the chat now. Ideally, you could put as a subject line, Explore Workshop with Anthosa and MongoDB. If you do that, we'll be more than happy to get in contact with you and organize the time to really take this from a general topic and make it specific to you. Also, all of you who've attended are absolutely welcome to register to receive Sharma's book, which is coming out soon. The title of the book is A Definitive Guide to Digital Transformation, and How to Overcome Challenges of Digital Transformation, Technology Modernization, and Artificial Intelligence Adoption. A really interesting and exciting piece of work coming out. You can do that on his website, and you'll see the actual URL located there. And looks like he's going to highlight that and put that into the chat as well. Additionally, if you reach out to him via LinkedIn, I'm certain he'd be happy to, and let him know that you attended, he'd be happy to provide you with a copy of that book when it comes out. Several really good questions around MongoDB and its applications. We had, I think, 3 or 4 really good questions. If you'd like to kind of get involved and understand a bit more through some self-paced learning, you can find that on the MongoDB Learning Portal. There's self-paced learning paths and there's self-paced tracings that you can get into to really familiarize yourself with that. We'll post those links also in the chat, and I believe Jens, Tim, and Tristan, I think those are relatively easy to find. Should you Google them?
Yep.
Yes.
Fantastic. So have a look at that. That's really going to get you hands-on to understanding some of those applications that are important to you. We also are going to give you a Forrester report from MongoDB, which explains kind of why they're the leader in Wave Transanalytical data platforms. It's one of those things that gives you an overview of the landscape as it is and gives you some deeper understanding as to why it's been ranked so highly. So we'll wrap up by asking you to please go ahead and register for those exploratory workshops. And also you can register for on-demand viewing of this video as well. Any final words, gentlemen, before we say goodbye to our participants? All right, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks all.